Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Get out of the Promoter 101.
Hey, it's David Marcus from Ticketmaster. Get your tickets to hear me on Promoter 101.
And welcome back to P101 Broadcasting Network, your home for news, clues, interviews, booze, and chews. I'm your host, Stan Manberger, joined as always by my co-anchor, Scoof Dudeman. Hey everyone, how you doing? Good to be here. Today we bring you some troubling news from Auburn, Washington, where two men seem to be pursuing world domination, using compressions and rarefactions of air via digital streaming services to promote what they call the most dankest podcast of all time. Thoughts on this, Scoof? Oh yeah, geez, it's terrible. Really scary stuff. Wow, geez. Our street correspondent, Richard Hardigan, has more. Thanks, Stan. I'm here at the scene of the podcast, and my sources tell me it's spread to every corner of the interwebs. From SoundCloud to Spotify, there seems to be no end to the badassery. After witnessing it firsthand, I must admit, it is most dank indeed. You should totes check it out. Back to you, Stan. And check it out I will. What's your reaction to this, Scoof? I'm gonna subscribe wherever I podcast. Menacing meanie-faced monsters or lascivious learned legends? You be the judge. Now on Promoter 101.
From beautiful downtown Auburn, it's the Promoter 101 podcast, and it's episode 102. Welcome, friends. Welcome, one and all, for an amazing 102 of 101. We are back here for a great podcast. We've got the goods this week. We've got Network Management's Terry McBride with a truly inspiring interview later on this podcast. What else we got, Dan?
Man, we've been teasing this for weeks. The Tobin Centers Aaron Zimmerman is going to give us a glimpse of his path from Chicago at Jam into the arenas, back down to the theaters, and just find, he's like Goldilocks. It's like, these clubs are too small. These arenas are too big. The Tobin Center, it's just right.
This is a real thing. We're going to hear the Aaron Zimmerman interview on this podcast.
Fuck it. Let's not play it. Let's keep teasing it. No, we love Aaron. It's a great interview, and we're excited to bring it to you today.
And we've got an amazing interview that closes out the podcast. We're going to be joined by Live Nation Canada's Alex Vyskocil, turning the tables on Steiny.
And the news of the week with, me and that guy.
Hello, this is Sarah Mertz.
Rick Barrow.
Nick Light.
Mark Geiger.
This is Lee Anderson.
Kevin Lyman.
John Giddings.
Jim Runge. Jeff White.
Brian Zisk.
Chuck Randall.
Brian O'Connell.
Andrea Johnson.
Adam Parsons.
Darielle Hyatt.
Ben Mensch.
Jamie Miller.
Billy Wayne Davis.
Brandon Frankel.
Miss LaFon.
Jake Gould.
Gary Smith. Jeff Cohen.
You are on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
You can listen to Promoter 101 like anywhere, including the place you're actually probably listening it to right this very moment, wherever you happen to be.
Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Music, wherever you podcast, we're there. Please do us a favor, hit the button and subscribe.
Hit that button. Hey, you can follow us on the Tweeter device, W. Luke Pierce, or The Jew, or Promoters 101, or Promoter 101, and, not a bad thing.
We got them all. And Dan, we got some live stuff coming up. Haven't had a public session in a while, but that's going to change November 13th in Beverly Hills. You're going to be at the Billboard Live Music Conference. Dan will be moderating from the Montage Hotel in Beverly Hills. And you're going to have an awesome interview, Dan. You're going to have activist artist management's Bernie Cahill on the dais up there with you, too. Looking forward to that one.
Speaking of a good Jewish boy, I like Bernie. He's a good guy. We'll be talking about the Dead and his exit from Roar, and it's just an awesome thing. So looking forward to hanging out with Bernie and sharing a dais with him. That should be awesome.
Join Dan at the Billboard Live Music Conference this November. You can still register at billboard.com.
If you want to tell us something, you can, either come up to the bar and say, hey, dude, this is what's happening. Or you can call us. You can use the Facebook Facebook Messenger device if you've friended us yet, or you can tweet at us. You can use that Instagram feature where it has message, or you could just email us at steiny@promoter101.net. We'll also accept smoke signals.
Good old-fashioned email, Dan.
Yeah, it works. And you can find either of us at that email address, which is steiny@promoter101.net. So, hey, do that.
This fall, coming to a conference near you. Two legends meet face to face.
Activists Bernie Cahill, Emporium presents Dan Steinberg, Billboard Live.
Bernie Cahill here. I'll be doing the keynote with Dan Steinberg at Billboard Live, Montage, Beverly Hills, November 13th.
If you've missed any of our past podcasts, dude, what the fuck, man? Catch up already, all right? Apparently you're not flying enough, and you should talk to your boss about getting a bigger travel budget. If you only have time for this week's episode and one more, we suggest you go back and listen to episode 58. That's a hell of an episode. Luke, who's on that again?
That was a great one, Dan. We were interviewing then AEG Presents Lenore Kinder, who was coming off the success of an amazing Lumineers tour that she promoted nationally. Of course, now she's at Paradigm Agency. We had Agent John Finberg on to talk about the moment that Nightwish was having. Plus, we had from Straight No Chaser, Mike Luganbill, giving an artist perspective, life on the road.
I gotta tell you, hanging out with Lenore is one of my favorite things to do on the entire planet. I'm so excited that we're going to re-air this, and I feel like we have to have her back on the podcast and talk about her new agent role.
Yeah, moving from one side of the table, buying some shows, to the other side, selling them, killing it with Casey Musgraves. We got to get her back here, Dan.
We will definitely work on that. But hey, don't forget to drop us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and we badly just need your approval.
We really, really do.
John Pleater, Vice President of ICM Partners. This is Promoter 101.
News of the week.
Time for the news of the week, Dan. History possibly in the making. The Music Modernization Act moves one step closer to law, past the House of Representatives in a vote on Tuesday, and will head for the president for signature. And we talked about this on previous podcasts, Dan, but this is some exciting legislation on the brink. And there was a brilliant piece that I'd love everybody to read about the making of this bill, what it'll mean for the music industry, not just from a business perspective, but from the sentiments of what this bill has done to galvanize certain forces around artists and writers within the business. It was a really interesting perspective. You can check it out. Article on Billboard by Ed Christman. Check that out. We'll be sure to tweet it, include it in the show notes as well.
So the venue wars might be over, but there's some more drama. AEG's Phil Andrews issued a statement claiming victory for AEG, saying the suit was a transparent public relation ploy that failed to pressure AEG into backing down from a booking policy that was effectively competitive response to the MSG Forum tie. On Tuesday, Sharon Osbourne, manager of Ozzy Osbourne, on an active participation in the recent drop of the suit, struck back by saying, "We know Mr. Anschutz, a.k.a., and I'm doing the air quotes here, Daddy Big Bucks," air quotes over, is living in his billionaire bubble. But the fact is that Ozzy sued AEG for the right to perform at the O2 in London. Okay, and continuing the quote, "So stop with your hubbly bubbly bullshit," in all caps, by the way, "and your little pissing contest with Live Nation and MSG." Fuck, Luke.
Yeah, right? I mean, this thing, we thought it was over. We thought this thing had ended. And here's Sharon Osbourne just with some fire thrown back at Phil Anschutz. It's pretty hilarious at a certain level to see that kind of just clapback, It's crazy.
Sharon has always been out front publicly, and she's been well in her public persona for that. Was it The Talk she's a co-host on, and she's been very public, and people just seem to love her. From the reality world, from the industry world, from the business world, she's not to be fucked with, and her ways of getting straight to the nuts of things is always welcome.
I can't imagine that there's going to be anything more further on this thing, but now I'm super interested as to how this thing wraps up. Let's stay tuned to what Sharon Osbourne has to say next.
I would like to add that I like her so much and definitely don't want to ever get into a public feud with her.
After statements like that, I don't think I would either. So Dan, we got some moving and shaking this week, so I figured we'd do the news, a little rapid fire, a quick lightning round of some major M&A announcements this week.
Hold on, Luke, what does M&A mean, Luke? You Who's dropping these terms?
Mergers and acquisitions, Dan.
Mergers and acquisitions. That sounds like an interesting term. Somebody's getting rich is what you're saying.
Somebody is getting rich, yes. Thursday morning, AEG announced the acquisition of the Columbus-based Promo West Productions, with Promo West CEO Scott Steiny staying on board to expand the industry giant's footprint in the Midwest. Promo West books and operates Newport Music Hall, The Basement, the A&R Music Bar in Columbus, and they've got a piece of Bunbury Music Festival in Cincinnati, Ohio, which they're going to retain. Exciting news as AEG continues its move into Ohio. Dan, what do you think about AEG making some moves in the Midwest?
We got buzz about this a couple weeks ago that this was coming to life. And if Scott's one of those guys, when it comes to Columbus, he's been the guy. He's been the major. He owns that market really well outright. He owns the venues. He does the big shows. And people like Scott. He's well respected and he does solid business. And he's built some really good venues, not only in Columbus, but in Pittsburgh. He used to be involved with the Agora in Cleveland, back with the LeContes back in the earlier 90s. So the guy has been around for a long time and does some serious business. So this is a good move by AEG, picking up some traction and doubling down in Ohio. So it should be interesting to see how the Steinecker-Belkin battle comes to be, because that's the matchup now, Michael Belkin versus Scott Steinecker. And I got to tell you, my money's on Belkin because Scott ain't got the juice. But
it's Michael Belkin, come on. I mean,
he ain't got the hair either. I mean, the power's in Belkin's hair. Let's be honest. Best hair in the industry.
Some Samson stuff there.
I want to talk to Samson.
I'm to the moon.
By the way, if you get the reference from that, email us and we will send you a prize. I guarantee. It doesn't matter if you're the first or the fifth. We will send you something special.
Exciting stuff happening in AEG. A showdown happening in the Midwest, and there's some new leaders covering that territory at AEG as well, too. The announcement of Promo West came a few days after they announced that Joe Litvag is out of the company. They're going to move Jason Rogalewski and Mike Descharme forward and promote them as regional VPs to oversee Detroit, Cleveland, and Milwaukee. That's Jason's territory, and Mike Descharme is going to cover Nashville, St. Louis, and KC, and they've already announced Mike's recent move to Music City to join us here. So what are you thinking about moving forward these two guys? Dan, you've worked with them a lot.
Well, Jason's going to do great in those markets, and this will be great. Mike D stepping into the big chair. I mean, who doesn't love Mike D? He's always been the guy in KC, clearly the guy in Nashville now, with AEG is like throwing money around like mad, building those new venues. St. Louis, this should be interesting because Joe was the guy there and that was his market. So to see how well somebody's handling it from outside the market should be interesting. Mike's done a ton of business in that market. So let's see how that affects the world for AEG in St. Louis, where you've got Live Nation as a serious player. You've got Littman that does a serious amount of business there too. So let's see if them not being physically there is going to affect that. Now, Litvag, on the other hand, was doing all of those radio events and ton of festivals. Now, with the breakup of that Danny Winter festival that they had and of that partnership was Rock on the Range, like it's curious to see the timing of that. So you got to wonder, where is Joe going to pop up? Because it doesn't just seem like he walked away. The guy's too good of a buyer just to go away, right? So my guess is he may pop up somewhere, and if it were at Danny's office, I wouldn't be completely shocked. I haven't talked to him yet, but I think we haven't seen the last of the powerhouse that is the booking entity of Joe Litvag.
Some more stuff moving on the record side of things. Joel Clayman, that's the former honcho GM at Columbia Records, has found a home in Los Angeles with L.A. Reid's newly opened Hitco Records. He joins L.A.'s new label, which is the home to Big Boy, Fifth Harmony's Dinah Jane, Yella Beezy as its president, but he'll remain in New York. Some movement happened on the record side of things this week, Dan. Finally, we got to get a big congrats to our buddy Dave Brooks as he completes the sale of Amplify Magazine to Billboard Magazine, where he and Taylor Mims will continue to nip at the heels of Polestar.
I was excited to see that announcement. It was great that Dave Brooks was able to break that news about Dave Brooks.
You read it first in Amplify Magazine, selling our magazine to Billboard Magazine.
We kid our good friend Dave Brooks, who we're happy that is, as we said last week, doing quite well. Scrooge McDuck diving into that big pile of gold that we're sure he got from the Billboard family.
And we're excited to see him as a member of Billboard and Amplify here at AIBA in Nashville this week. Looking forward to catching up, Dave.
Are you going to AIBA, Luke?
I will be at a few things at AIBA this week. I've got some stuff going on. I've got some clients playing shows on Wednesday and Friday here in Nashville, and I've got a bunch of meetings with David Britz, who's in town. So I'll be popping in and out.
If anyone's around, CA's showcase, got to give a shameless plug to CA, who's got Home Free on Monday night. Hope to see you at the bar then.
Normally we do a preview, and I guess selfishly, as I'm not going to make AIBA, I didn't write it into the script this week, but we should talk about the power of AIBA. First of all, it's going to be sold out if it isn't already, but they were saying it was at like 99% sold. The hotel's been gone for a while, and I'm getting emails from people trying to set up meetings like mad. The event has really gotten to critical mass.
This year feels weird to me. If we're going to do an AIBA breakdown, which I'd love to talk about in the podcast here, they moved it from the Omni in Nashville to the JW Marriott, which in my experience in music business conferences, changing a home, whether it be a city or a well-known location, sometimes disrupts the flow for things. And this year's AIBA, I think, is challenged by that move. Last year and previous years, the Omni was connected to the Country Music Hall of Fame and the showcasing space and some of the ballroom space that was available for these parties and showcases where agents would have buyers in. This year, they're physically separating that, and it's not a huge difference between the JW Marriott and Cannery Row, the music place where they're going to be holding this, but it is a little bit of a walk. It's like, 4/10 of a mile down a hill, and we've had some shitty weather here at Nashville. I could see it being a challenging thing to get people out to those things, and it's also a different hotel. It's a brand new hotel here in Nashville, and I think just that difference of space is going to change up the feel of the conference a little bit this year. And I also have to say this too, Live Nation has their annual meetings, their corporate meetings happening in Las Vegas. So I know that half of Live Nation's folks, which is not necessarily the folks that are coming to AIBA, are not going to be there. So it feels like way more venue people are registered for the conference this year. A lot of building managers, a lot of GMs, less producers, less like content folks on the sell side seem to be registered this year. So I think it's going to be an interesting year for AIBA. Panels and awards, I'm sure will be great. I'm sure the showcases will go off really well, but just in a different location and a different feel. And I think it'll be a year where we might have to do some reflection after this year's AIBA. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it next week. Anyone to come to town, I'd love to get together. I'd love to see you. So hit me with an email, steiny@promoter101.net.
AEG's meetings are also next week. The idea that they would put Live Nation and AEG would put their meetings right on top of these things is interesting. I think AEG's got accompanying meetings to AIBA, which is a really good idea. But the fact that it happens, you said, right on top of the Live Nation meetings means that there'd be a lot of people that probably should be there that probably won't. And that's an interesting thing, right? So who's going to be in that room? But it sounds like it's going to be packed and there's a lot going on. But these conferences, man, now that there's not a Billboard New York, there's only one thing on that side of the Mississippi, and that's AIBA. And I know you can see that APAP is in New York, but really for rock and roll country festival buyers, you're talking Billboard, you're talking Polestar, you're talking AIBA, right? And that for America. And that is it now on that side of the country. So a lot of people, it's the only conference they can drive to. And it's become quite the big daddy of them all. I also really appreciate the showcases that they do at AIBA. It's like no other.
Yeah, it's super well done. And I think that's why this conference has been one of the most productive conferences for a lot of promoters and managers and buyers alike in the past couple of years is how turnkey the presentation of businesses over there. And I think having it in Nashville where it's all in kind of a downtown central location between all the agency offices makes it really easy to get agents out of the office on a daily basis compared to LA where, you got to go from Century City all the way to downtown, it's been that conference for a couple of years now. I hope it continues to be because it seems like everybody is getting a lot of work done there, which is the whole point of these things. But who knows? They'll take a life of their own when they make some moves like this.
Tip of the hat to Pam Matthews and Cole. They both have done a great job developing that conference into what it is. And, sad I'm missing it this week and definitely was excited to be there last year. We brought the podcast there. If you want to go back and listen to it, it's the Bob Rue episode, which is awesome. But we had a great time in Nashville last year. I think you and me both really enjoyed that conference.
It was a great one. Looking forward to it again this next week. So come on Music City. See you this weekend.
All right. Well, we digress.
Hey, what's going on? This is Bubbles.
This is Julian. And this is Ricky.
You're listening to Promoter 101.
In our featured interview this week, we've got Nettwerk Management's Terry McBride. He's joining us for a truly inspirational interview. Check it out.
We are in Vancouver and hanging out at Nettwerk. Terry McBride, dude, thank you so much for taking time.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Vancouver, whole different country, yet so close. And yet you guys have produced so many amazing acts that the world has just embraced. And you've been at the management help of so many of them.
You know, I view North America as North America. The fact that we have a border is really interesting, being that borders these days mean absolutely nothing, especially when it comes to music. So we kind of don't view ourselves as a separate country. I mean, in some ways, I'm glad we are. But the way that we look at music, we don't look at nationality. We don't look at culture. We don't even look at the sort of language. We just listen to the music and see whether it has what we're interested in. So it's a bit of a different point of view, but it works really well for us.
So where do you start? I mean, what turns you on about an artist that you're like, I want to be involved with that? What's the first part of that process for you?
It really comes down to music. I have to love it. Not like it, not think that I can make money from it. I got to love it. If I don't love it, I'm not interested. Doesn't mean that I can't be a fan and come to love it later. So that's really, really crucial. Then can we add value? If we can't add value, then we should stay away. If we think that we can add value to the artist's career, then I think that there's a conversation to have. Then in meeting with the artist, do we like the artist? Are they a nice person or are they not a nice person? If they're a nice person, check that box, keep on talking. What is the team around the artist? Is the manager going to add value or devalue? And those are all the things that go into the, process. And, we also sign artists that don't have management. So obviously that, value and devalue doesn't even enter into the equation. So that's what we look for. And that's how we do every single one of our signings.
You ever found a really talented artist that musically you were like completely there and you're just like, I don't want to be in business with this person and you walked away?
Absolutely.
So that's just a way of life. It's just, you're not going to deal with that?
Life is far too short. There's 100 people that work in Nettwerk around the world, and I'm asking them to emotionally invest their time and effort into an artist's career. They've got to believe that that artist will be a positive force upon this world. And they've got to believe that that artist is going to respect not only their audience, but the people that help them get there. And if they're not, then there are other artists who we love who do want to. And that's where we'd rather put our energies.
So you wear a bunch of different hats. The management thing, the label thing, the yoga side of your world. Mm-hmm. What makes you say, okay, I want to do this for that artist, or I'll do that for this artist, or where does that begin?
I think the company wears many hats. I myself, for the first 20 odd years, was an artist manager. I decided in 2008 not to be an artist manager, and slowly but surely got out of artist management with the focus on my label, because even though I was good at dealing with the drama that created the music, I much preferred the music that was created by the drama. That way I could leave my cell phone out of my bedroom and actually fully enjoy the music.
I love that line. That's amazing.
Well, I dealt with some very large international artists who wrote and created some pretty amazing music, but lived their music. And that can be very, very hard for a manager when sometimes you're the only honest word that's in the room. By just working at the record label, I could be that. I could just be myself and honestly say what I think and not have to be worried about any, implications afterwards.
So let's talk about how you got to your place in the industry, like how you found your way to the industry. How'd that start for you?
Well, Mark and I started the record label in 1984. We didn't know what we were doing, which was probably the best thing.
The middle of MTV's hit success.
Actually, they weren't even around yet. We're in the days of cassettes just getting traction. MTV was more late 80s, early 90s. So this is 84, where 99% of the business is vinyl, where the separation in my one-bedroom apartment between the office and where I slept was stacks of record boxes. That was the hallway.
Talk about living it.
Yeah, well, we had to. I mean, we woke up, we worked it. Both Mark and I had our own jobs. And then at, nighttime, a bunch of us would, gather and just keep working at it. So that was our life.
When you say your own jobs, you mean you had a day gig outside the industry?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my particular case, I did everything from DJ at nighttime, working in a record store, lifeguard, working in a fish factory, delivered pizzas, did anything and everything I basically could to realize this dream.
You had the struggle. You earned this.
It took 10 years. I seem to recall that at that point it was Mark, my business partner, along with Rick, who had then joined in to the ownership group, and myself. 10 years in, we were finally able to not work other jobs and be able to sustain a living from Nettwerk. And when I say a living, I'm talking about something that we might have been better off if we were on welfare.
Wow.
So, we had to earn it. There was just no way around it.
You put the time in and clearly have enjoyed some serious success over the years, and great hit records, some huge singles, some amazing artists. Is there a moment before the albums come out as a manager or as a label where you've been able to go, that song, that's going to be huge. That's the magic?
Yes. And then it's a matter of what's the path to allow that to happen. You mentioned Bare Naked Ladies Stunt, the song 1 Week. If we come out of the box with 1 week, it would never have been a number one single. We needed to build up the band's profile in order to get there. So that was a building the band's base with a song called The Old Apartment, then going back to a song called Brian Wilson, setting the tone, setting the base so that 1 week had a launching pad. If I think of Sarah McLachlan's Angel, it's a 5-minute piano song. How is that ever going to get on top 40 radio and become a number one single? So it needed its own vehicle, which happened to be a movie called City of Angels, where the song was used in a piece that was about 2 minutes long, and there was no talking, it was just the music. And that set the tone that when that song did get on radio and the odd station gave it a shot, the phones erupted, and that allowed a pathway for that song. So sometimes you can hear a song and you know it's a big song. But if you try and go out in the marketplace without setting up, without having a strategy, it'll never become a big song.
Let's go back to Bare Naked Ladies for a second, because here's an act. If you see them live, they're almost a comedy show. Like, the music's great, but it's almost secondary. It's like Sha Na Na for the modern day. AAA radio clearly took to it, and If I Had $1 Million, so funny. The songs are so entertaining, so fun to sing along to. The guys have so much charisma, but at the same time, they're basically a comedy act. They're almost kids in the hall meet a AAA act. How do you find a path where you're like, people are going to get this and radio is going to help this? It would almost be like hitting your head against the wall trying to figure out how to break that, it would seem.
Well, I think the initial conversation happened with the band when we came on as management going, you're amazing musicians. They really are amazing musicians. And guess what? You're really great songwriters. Your lyrics actually hit an emotional point that people can relate to. You have the potential to create bookmarks within inside people's lives where they can follow your music and 20 years later, they can hear $1 million or they can hear The Old Apartment. And that'll take them back to a time and place where that song was their song and they can relate to the emotions that they're going through at that time. So they had that ability. My issue with them was the fact that then they would dress up and be total goofballs.
So you didn't see that as a positive?
No. What I saw was, okay, be funny, be real, be authentic. No issue with that. But dumbing it down for the sake of getting an extra, laugh and then taking away the attention from the fact that these are really good songs and you're amazingly good live players is not helping your cause any. So it took 3 to 5 years to reshape it, but not change it. Just reshape it. Keep it authentic, build it back up, and then go for that home run.
I'm confused because it doesn't sound like you have a problem with them being silly, but it seems like you didn't want them to make a joke of the music. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, the songs are already there. The musicianship was already there. The videos and the antics within inside those videos and their sort of visual, they could have been a children's artist. And so there is a disconnect from the song to how they were showcasing the song. And my whole point is you're actually really, really good. You're not a children's artist. You're writing really relevant songs. You kind of need to take yourself a little bit more seriously.
Because if you hide it inside a comic book, it won't come off the same way kind of vibe?
So it was be authentic, but really be aware to how your imaging shapes perception. Allow the music to shape the perception, not the imaging.
Because live, there probably isn't too many bands that flow as well as them because they can...
They are one of the best live bands in the world, period. And they are consistently good live. You have some artists that at some points in their career are absolutely stunning. The Bare Naked Ladies, if you want to say anything, they're consistently good.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you get the jam bands get credit for how good they are live at jamming and just creating on the spot. And here's a band that can manipulate a song every way they want live, and the band never loses it. And they really, because of some of the other elements, you probably never get that as much as the write-up on them.
Well, I think because they're such great musicians, they're able to flow like a jazz band, where they can go anywhere. And any one of the instruments can take the lead there. And they're also comfortable and also accomplished that just flows naturally.
Can we talk about the success of Lilith Fair and how that came to be?
Sure. Lilith, oh God, this goes back, 20 years now, I think? Lilith came out of a frustration that Sarah had with the fact that whenever we put a female support on her shows, her agent Marty Diamond would always hear flack from the promoters who were putting up the money and putting up the risk and promoting the shows because they did not believe that female-female type events could be successful. And that really irritated her, and rightfully so, because it was BS. It was a way of thinking that was archaic. and belonged in another time. But it was still really, really prevalent then. So she had that situation. She had that point of view, and it was the correct point of view. She had gone and toured Filming Towards Ecstasy for the better part of almost 3 years. Burnt out, pretty much took a year off. I wanted to get her back into music. It was always hard to get her back after, emotionally wiping her out, working her butt off on the road and having to grind it out. So a way to get her back to realize how much she enjoyed playing live, because she really did, was to create a couple of events during a summer, and where she herself would not be viewed as the headline. And that was her challenge. Okay, you want me to go out there? I'm willing to do it. I don't want a headline. So we did 2 shows in support of Sting in Toronto. She absolutely loved it. And then we did 3 shows where we put together multiple female lineups, one in Detroit, one in Los Angeles, and one in San Francisco. They weren't called Lilith.
Was there a rhyme or reason to why you picked those markets? I mean, San Francisco and LA makes sense, but Detroit's a little...
Detroit, at that time, Pine Knob was a great outdoor venue. You had an alternative station in the marketplace. You had a AAA station in the marketplace. You had Bleed from Canadian radio coming into that marketplace. You had the right set of circumstances where you could go in, and if the show did 5,000, you're okay. And if the show did 15,000, you're doing high fives. And ended up doing 15,000. So obviously we did high fives. She came off the stage at that show and went, I love this. Absolutely amazing. It was 5 female artists. Nobody thought it was going to do 15,000, which is why you had to pick the venue where the cost structure could support something that would do 5,000, right? And she came off stage and she absolutely loved it. We have to do this. This is what I want to do.
That was the model.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to book one more show. It's going to be in Vancouver. We'll play it in 6 weeks from now because summer's going to end. You need to come up with a name. If you want to go do this next summer, you need to come up with a name. And I need the name in about 2 weeks because I'll have to brand the show with that name so I can trademark the name. So the time that you go out next, summer, I can get all the, business stuff taken care of around it. And she chose the name, Lilith Fair.
The tour ran successfully for several years.
3 years.
It became the Lollapalooza of AAA / women's music.
Well, it actually became the largest traveling festival ever in the world.
It's
a lot of festivals were at one site, sometimes at 2 sites. We did anywhere between 25 to 40 sites every single summer with a rotating lineup. And I don't think people realize, I think what got lost in it all was back then it was, the sort of media, of course, glammed onto it. It's like, oh, there's no men, there's no this, there's no that. It wasn't about exclusion. It was actually about inclusion. There was probably just as many guys on like stage playing, but it was all female artists who were not getting invited to the other festivals. And we wanted to make it safe so people could come out and not be afraid of getting groped or afraid of getting assaulted, either physically, verbally, or whatever. We wanted to create a safe environment around music. That doesn't mean that the music was vanilla white music. It just meant that it was safe.
It was a different time in music where Lollapalooza, Lilith Fair, Warped Tour, Horde were all on the roads as traveling festivals with many, many bands, many, many people, huge crews. And that's gone away. This year we saw the last of those go away. Warped Tour finally came to an end. But all of those festivals went away over time. Do you think that's because there's so many single destination festivals now, or was that just a stronger moment to push the things through the amphitheaters? Or why was that model so successful back then and has kind of died out now, do you think?
Lilith had its time and place, and I think it was successful because of what it represented. And it actually created the whole new format of radio called Hot AC. Because at that point in time, there was not a lot of female music that was on the radio. You had a bit of top 40, you had a bit of urban, you had a little bit of AAA, you had a little bit of alternative, but not a lot. There wasn't a format. Yet here was 15, 25,000 people a night who clearly liked this sort of music, putting down some serious money to come see a show. That wasn't lost on radio. And it was the birth of Hot AC radio. So it was radio that was pop leaning, but wasn't afraid to play female artists.
It seems like that festival helped elevate most of those artists. So it was Rising Tides, Raises All Ships kind of a thing?
Mm-hmm.
So just getting on the festival would be a solid thing for your career alone.
Well, I think getting on the festival allowed you to play in front of tens of thousands of people. And it wasn't just that. It was the whole intent of the festival was to change perception. And not just for the artists, but also at the local level. I mean, one of the highlights was a press conference. Usually press conferences are like pulling teeth. They're like not a highlight. But the highlight was $1 from every ticket went to a local women's charity. So you have a women's charity getting a $15,000 to $25,000 check at this press conference. They would break down in tears because that check at that point represented the difference between them staying open or not staying open. And that was the intent and the impact of what Lilith was meant to have. And it was very much realized. And that's what made it different from a lot of other festivals, is that there was a clear intent. It wasn't just music. It was about giving back. It was about having safety. It was about creating an environment where music could be fun. And a lot of those other festivals at that point in time, it wasn't about that. Like, it wasn't safe, especially for a female. Just simply wasn't.
No, why did it come to an end? It seems like 3 years would be a short run for something that was really in its peak.
3 years, if you're putting on a festival that does 25 to 40 shows a year, it's a 12-month job. And,
It's taking a toll on you guys?
It didn't allow us to do anything else. For Sarah to have to tour 3 years straight upon one album becomes a bit torturous. You want to have a life. Music's part of your life. It's not all of your life. I was managing many other artists. I had no life. Marty Diamond had no life. Dan Fraser had no life. So the four principles, it was Lilith or nothing. Because if you didn't go 100% in, you weren't going to do it right. So at the end of year 2, we made a decision to only do one more year because we, realized that we ourselves would get burnt out. And it wasn't what we wanted to basically do. I'm not a concert promoter. Dan Fraser, who's a partner at Nettwerk, is not a concert promoter. Marty's a booking agent and Sarah's a artist. None of us wanted to run a 25 to 40 date festival tour every summer.
Makes sense. It wasn't what you signed up for.
Not what we signed up for. No.
With that said, with maybe the model of Palooza being a stationary festival or the concept of it's been a while, it's a big enough brand. The idea of it hasn't gone away. Have you guys thought about bringing it back in some format at some point?
I think someone else should do it. I honestly do. We did our bit, but that was 20 years ago. There's a younger generation of female artists who have a much larger voice. And if you consider the political climate within the world right now, I think it's a really good time and place for something like that to maybe come to be. But it shouldn't be Lilith. It should be something that has the intent that's structured around the perceptions of today.
Your vibe of music is one part of your life. It shouldn't be the entire thing. And obviously the yoga, which I definitely want to talk about, like you've made some life decisions that have to be about quality of life. It seems like that is a more well-rounded thing that sometimes our industry tends to forget. How did you come to that?
Boy, when I started to get into yoga, the running joke with all the major industry peeps was Terry's going to run our way to an ashram and we're like never going to see him. He's going to pull off a Leonard Cohen who went up to be a monk for however long Leonard did. They completely lost the intent of what I was doing. And what's funny is many of those executives now do yoga. The yoga business and the music business are essentially the same business.
What are the parallels to you?
They're both thousands of years old, and the monetization in each of those businesses is emotion. People consume music because it makes a difference inside their lives. They attach their own emotions to the emotion of the artist, and they turn it into their own, which is why the RIAA could not understand kids wanting to share music. And so they would litigate those kids for sharing music rather than seeing the opportunity inside the, to actually monetize the emotion. People usually come to yoga out of need for change of life. It's usually either spiritually or emotionally or physically, and it all ends up being emotional at the end of the day. If you stick with it, it emotionally changes you. Music emotionally changes you. And the business of each of those two is the monetization of that emotion, creating an environment where they can practice or listen to music that is a positive one. They're the exact same business.
I had never thought of it that way.
And a lot of people don't, which I completely get, because till you do it, how are you supposed to know? You have to live it.
It's fascinating. How did you find it originally? How did it come into your life?
Coming out of a long-term relationship, needed to go find myself. And, I did not want to be finding it inside the, music. I already had that. So I wanted to go and find things that would challenge me. I took a yoga class. It was the most humbling event of my life. And I realized that at that point, I was in different shape. I wasn't in wrong shape. I was playing tennis for probably 6 times a week for like a couple of hours. I was in good shape, but I was in different shape.
You say most humbling event of your life or experience of your life. Why was it so humbling?
Because not only did I not know a single yoga pose, but you would, see people who you thought were not in shape getting into these poses that you'd be falling over. It was absolutely humbling. The most profound thing for me about yoga is probably 9 months in, I got a postcard from my chiropractor asking where I had been. Haven't seen you in a while. Come visit. And that's when I realized that for the first time in many years, my body was no longer in pain. I wasn't have to go to the chiropractor every 6 weeks to get it adjusted, to get rid of the pain for a couple of weeks. And then it would slowly but surely creep back in. The yoga basically alleviated that. It was nice not being in pain.
And it was completely a secondary effect because it wasn't how you found secondary.
That. Everyone's path to yoga is different. Mine was initially physical. And now for me, within a yoga class, probably for 60, 70% of the class, my eyes are closed. It's a moving meditation for me. I do it 4 times a week. I do it at lunchtime. You can't book me during that time frame. And it's my hour to hour and a half for me. I believe it makes me a better person. It makes me a better leader inside both companies.
It's important.
I think it's important for everybody, not just for me. I kind of view it as building Y Yoga. I was building a studio for me, which was selfish, but selfless because there's millions of me. So I was building something that I really believed in and that I wanted to share. Doesn't that sound like music?
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same friggin' business.
I see what you did there. You brought me all the way around.
It's the same emotional connection. I wanted to share the yoga because it made me feel really good. I want to share songs I love because they make me feel really good. If a song makes me feel like shit, I don't want to share it.
It makes a lot of sense. You had mentioned something earlier about the Record Society didn't necessarily see what the online stuff was doing. When that originally started happening with Napster and then into iTunes and the internet exploding and things leaving radio and going digital, did you see that as a marketing tool or did you see that as people stealing your content?
I didn't see it as people stealing my content, even though about 95% of my peers did. And Nettwerk actually was the first company to, as a member of the RIAA, to step out and fight the RIAA. And we actually spent probably about $100,000 defending a family in Texas against a lawsuit by the RIAA because they were suing this kid who had shared music illegally by the law, but the intent was not illegal. And that was the whole point. They were doing it. And one of the artists that they had named was, Sarah. Sarah would never sue a fan. Why? What's that about? Are you going to sue someone who wants to share your music with others? No. What the RIAA didn't get, and it took many, many years for them to get, is I've always viewed music as water. Water's free. But if you package it in a certain way and you add value to it in a certain way, people will pay for it. If you put it in a bottle, people will pay $3, $4 for it. If you filter it, people will pay for that. If you do all these things, people will, pay for it. So I viewed the way forward was to make piracy a hassle, to make something better than piracy. And the only way to do that was to stop, for one, suing the fans. Myself and a fellow named Brent Muley, who now works and has worked for probably the better part of about 10 years for Apple over in Europe, we co-wrote a paper for Westminster University in London called Meet the Millennials. And we wrote it in the winter of 2007, and it was published in 2008. And in there are many of the concepts that have now become the norm. In there, we, talked about some form of digital valet, something that would serve up music in a way that would add value to the music and decimate piracy. I would argue that Spotify is that digital valet. And that was our whole point, was that litigating your customer was a really bad business model. Understanding how to monetize their emotions in a consistent way is a very good business model. But till you get rid of the litigation, which is a very negative thing, and you start looking at the opportunity, you're never going to build something. And a lot of what then I talked about for a couple of years was we needed to move on this because you could create this valet or a pirate was going to create this valet. And we as an industry needed to either create it or have somebody else create it better, which ultimately, obviously, Daniel, did. And Nettwerk was one of the early supporters of Spotify because we could see it. We could understand it. I did many, many talks in Sweden and Finland and Denmark around that whole thought process. that a valet type of service was the way for the music to basically have a future. Make it really easy for people to consume something so that they can make it themselves. Playlists are simply the mixed cassettes that I used to make. And guess what? When I was a teenager, I made mixed cassettes. And I gave them to girls that I wanted to date because that's the only way.
So you were sharing music.
I'll get there. It was the only way that I could emotionally express myself. Did I realize that I was breaking the law? No. If you told me that I was breaking the law, I would not have understood why. Because each of those songs on those mixed cassettes, I'd attach my own emotions to. I own those songs emotionally. And I was trying to express them to someone else to see whether they felt the same way. And that's what the gatekeepers at that time did not understand.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like there was a period after the internet really took off where everybody was talking about the record labels are dead and they'll never survive again. But it seemed more like it was a Darwinism thing that the people that have adapted came out much stronger, that there was a whole nother platform to make money and to service, and you didn't have to pay for physical content nearly as much, and you could adapt to this.
Yeah, and once Brent and I had written that paper, my days as an artist manager were over. Because once I had the opportunity to put down a lot of the things that I honestly believed in and thought about, then I realized I really wanted to be in the music business, not be an artist manager.
It's a really defining moment.
Yeah, and I mean, Nettwerk still has a great management company. We manage some great artists, and I'll help those managers, but I'm not a manager. I haven't been for over a decade, and I'm much happier for not being one.
But you're still quite involved with our business on a very big level.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's obviously I broke a lot of big international artists. So I've seen a lot of things. So there's a lot of wealth and knowledge. And the managers with Inside Nettwerk have complete access to me. So they can, what would you do in this situation? Have you ever seen this situation? What is your perspective on it? I think having that level of conversation, honestly, I believe helps them make their own decisions. But I want to emphasize their decisions, not mine.
Did you ever anticipate a moment in the industry where record stores wouldn't exist anymore and the retail side of that wouldn't be driving the whole thing?
No. And I actually see the retail part growing a bit. It's not going to grow a lot, but it's never going to go away. What I'm loving about where everything's going, frankly, is the ability to share, that emotional connection, the resurgence of I'll call it the middle class artist, the artist that can make $100,000 to $200,000 a year from their intellectual property, so that touring becomes a want, not a need. Because it's been a need for the last 15 years. If you didn't tour, you couldn't make a living. I think we're getting to the time and place where that's not the case. Now touring should be a want, not a need. And I think that makes touring more exciting and actually a bit more authentic.
Well, it'll probably be healthier for the business, too, if
I think it's healthier
every
for
act
the
can play
artist.
the same market every year, too.
It's
that they don't have to be on the road.
It's healthier for the artist. Like, artists need to live lives. They need to experience things, to write about those things, to give us those emotions that then help people through their own emotions.
Allow the labor leisure, continuing to work a little bit.
Well, call it work-life balance. Call it whatever you want. I think the business is in a really good place. What I do like about it is we're almost 100% green, which I think is awesome.
It's all digital?
Yeah, it's all digital.
I don't know that anybody's actually put it to me that way before, that it is so green, because it doesn't exist.
It's also a flat world. It's you can live in Vancouver, but your most popular market might be Norway, might be the Philippines. In the past, that was physical. You were beholden to the physical marketplace to have that opportunity. Now you're not. So now there's the ability that if your music, suppose it's rainy day music, it probably fits the Nordics better because it's a gray environment. The music tends to be a little bit more sad.
So I wouldn't have even thought about this, but I guess global distribution is so much easier that you can hit places digitally that you physically would have had to make a plan of attack for back pre-internet that you may never even tried to become a big artist in or even exist in, where you suddenly are worth real tickets in that market.
Correct. I mean,
without even trying.
Passenger's a great textbook case of that. We have another artist named, Simo, where that's happening. He's a kid from Seattle who's now selling out quite large venues in Belgium and Netherlands, and only starting to get attention in his own home country now. So in the old model, he would have been dead in the water. In this model where music can travel and it's a flat world, so there are no borders, and, music and pictures are about the only two things that are universal. It can travel across cultures, and it's awesome.
I hadn't thought about that, but it is an amazing way where you can just anywhere that it seeps into a tastemaker's head and starts developing you.
And the great thing is we have the ability to see everywhere. So, I mean, if I think of Mike Posner's I Took a Pill in Ibiza, it was streaming in Finland. It was Shazamming in Russia. 18 months later, it was #1 single with Inside America. Without that, streaming in Finland and Shazamming in Russia, it would never have been a #1 single in America. We needed one marketplace to show reaction, to show support.
So kind of the big little horn thing in a Mass Effect.
Yep, and then you just move it. You move it around the world. Passenger, the exact same thing. Simmel, the exact same thing. So it's the ability to see and the ability to understand what you're actually seeing, and then the ability to have to run the marathon and have the passion to actually spread it.
You're running a global business. How do you see the entire board from where you sit? There's just so many moving pieces.
That laptop right there and that big, huge screen. No, I mean, a lot of the marketing around Lilith was all digital. It was all localized, but it was all from a very worldwide point of view. Breaking an artist has always been from a worldwide point of view. If you can break an artist on 3 continents, you just made them a 20-year career. If you only break them on one, they probably have a 5 to 10-year career. So it's always been a goal to have a flat world artist. And the ability to see with inside the data what's actually happening, and data doesn't lie, then it's can you actually use what you know to effectively build an artist brand?
And you're blowing my fucking mind, dude. Next.
Now you know why I went back into the record label. Having done it for artists as a manager from a global point of view, you got to learn and respect cultures, but you got to understand how music travels.
Where do you think the business is going?
Upwards. And I think it's going back to the middle class, which makes me really, really happy. You're always going to have the big artists. You're always going to have the hot artists of today. But I think within the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see anywhere between, I'm going to guess, 20 to 100,000 artists that I'll call the middle class that are going to be able to make a living creating the music that they love without having to have, quote, commercial success. And I think that is a really good thing.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you one more question, and that is, you grew up on music where all you got was the J card or the back of the album. That's your entire connection to the band, unless you were singing them live that day.
Correct.
And you probably studied the hell out of it. You knew Ted Templeman produced the Van Halen album.
You know what? I didn't go that deep. I was more into the graphics and the branding and the lyrical content of the songs, trying to understand what they were trying to say or where did the song come from. Production to me can definitely make a song better, but a song is a song. How you decide to dress it up, whether it's singer-songwriter, whether it's country, whether it's EDM, whether it's rock, it's still the same song. And, you know, some of the most brilliant people within inside this business, such as Clive Davis, understood that a song's a song. And you can move it from genre to genre to genre, production to production to production. But without the song, you can't do that. So I wasn't so locked into the production of it. I was more locked into the emotion of it. Now, did I realize that when I was 17 years old? Absolutely not. I was too busy bringing my turntable over to my friend's house who had an amplifier but didn't have a turntable. So it was a community get together around his pool table as, you know, someone brought the preamp, someone brought the amp, and someone brought the turntable, and someone had the speakers because we couldn't afford to buy the whole friggin' unit. That was us. And then, you know, playing pool to this music and talking about the music and looking at these sort of graphics. I wasn't the production nerd. It was like, what does this song mean? You know, and the conversations were about what does it mean to us, but what's the artist trying to say? And I think that's why I, you know, fell in love with like the Beatles, because they were so out there and with incredible melodies, but lyrics that made you have to guess at what it was. And then you talk to 6 different friends around a pool table, and each song meant a different thing to each of us. And then the argument would be who was right. But that was, I wish I'd understood that when I first started in music, because it definitely would have shaped me earlier rather than halfway through my career.
Dude, blowing my mind. Do you think that having that limited content to use your imagination to create what you thought it meant and those arguments versus the amount of content acts put out now between the website and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and the interaction the acts now have with their fans has helped the industry, or do you think that it's taken away some of the mystique?
I think each generation has its own perception. So it's a good question, but it's a generational one. I think to this generation, they would say, how could you only have 40 songs on the radio and have to hear that song over and over and over again? How boring is that? That would probably be their comeback. But that's what I grew up with. And it was only the import shows on Sunday night at midnight that had anything different. So my whole thing is I go back to playlists. And everyone, we don't like playlists. I'm like, playlist is a mixed cassette. I think the advantage that Spotify has over both Apple and Amazon is the organic curation that happens and the sharing that happens is well over half, maybe even 60% of the overall Spotify streams. But that's not the case at Apple and Amazon, which is highly curated. So Apple and Amazon are still very much a radio model. Spotify is the cassette kid trying to share their emotions with their group of 20 friends and maybe the one girl that they want to try and date. So that to me is really interesting. And you're seeing this happen in a flat world. You're seeing it happen culturally, which is really interesting to me.
You started out talking about your mixtapes, and that was how you shared your point of view. Do you ever, when you're making playlists, or I assume you still make playlists, do you still have that same point of view when you're doing that?
I do. I make playlists for the yoga studios to fit the morning, afternoon, and so the evening to create a certain vibe of like music and lyrical content within inside the studios. But what I love more than anything is then teachers within inside the studio itself create their own playlists for their own yoga sequencing. And I love that blend of both. And I think it's awesome. So playlists to me are about sharing. Albums were a concept that got its start with accountants. How can we put 8 songs or 10 songs and charge for 12? Just like the single is, how can we put on 2 songs and charge for 3? And then you had artists in the 60s and 70s, all of a sudden they realizing that they had 22 minutes to work with. Let's just do one song for 22 minutes. Let's make it a concept. And then everybody got
Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. Yeah.
Everybody got romantic around that and is stuck on that. Well, that's generational. The album is a generational thing. This generation's album is their playlist.
Yeah, I don't see anybody doing any Inagata Vita type length.
No,
songs.
and my whole thing with artists is I love that you're romantic. Let's think about playlists, and once you've got 12 songs that you think fit together really, really well, then let's make a piece of vinyl, and you can sell it at your merchandising booth.
That's so cool.
Because how you perceive music and how your audience perceives music could be 2 completely different things. And guess what, to the artist? You don't own your music, and guess what? I don't either. Your fans do. Let them share it.
From that point of view, do you wind up fighting out sometimes which songs are in which order because you perceive it different than the artist does?
No, it's the sequencing of albums I've always kept myself out of. The release of tracks within inside a streaming ecosystem, I do weigh in on because certain songs travel down certain laneways. A lot of the playlists are highly curated, with the exception of obviously the organic fan ones. So if you want to get on that playlist, you need to understand what the curator's trying to create, which is a sound and a vibe and a feeling. And those curators are, in fact, artists. And so you might have a great song, you might be a singer-songwriter, but if you don't produce it in a certain way, it might not get on that playlist because it doesn't fit sonically with inside the playlist. And artists have got to understand that. They should not change what they do, but they need to understand that. And so when an artist brings music forward and I pick one of the songs that I like to pitch to the, streaming service, I've got the manager for me, but that's not the radio single. I'm like, yeah, but it is the song that actually will travel around the world. And here's all the reasons for it. So where I come from is love the music that you bring to us. Because chances are the song that you least think is going to be the one that travels the world will be the one. And then you're going to be stuck for the next 15 years having to sing that song. I remember talking to Mike around, past guys, I said, you realize you're stuck playing Let Her Go till you're 80 years old. And he just laughed. He said, it's a good thing I love the song.
And I don't know that I've enjoyed interviewing anybody this much in a very long time. I want to thank you so much for making time.
Picking the wrong interviews.
Maybe. But you're clearly a mind of the next generation for our business, and I truly appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for making the effort to come here.
Terry is just a mind at work, just impressive all the way around. I don't know how many times he blew my mind during this interview, but it was at least a handful. The guy is just much smarter than the average bear.
Yo, this is Tommy Lee. Yeah, that T-Lee. And you're listening to Promoter 101. Fucking turn this shit up, bitches.
Tweets of the week.
Can't avoid them, Dan. It's the name of the podcast. Let's get into some Promoter 101 tweets of the week. Let's start here. When a manager calls you to rant in the middle of the night about the shithole his act is booked into, and you remind him it's not your date.
Yeah, you didn't sell me this one. So can I go back to sleep now, please?
When you vibe, someone is looking for a fight, so you give them what they want quickly, and they are bummed as they clearly wanted the fight.
I'm sorry I gave you what you want. Sorry about that.
When a production manager of a multiple truck tour waits to advance until 48 hours of a Monday's show.
Thank God for great union stewards to save all of our asses, huh?
Absolutely. That'll do it for Promoter 101 Tweets of the Week. Make sure you keep up with Dan. He's on Twitter @TheJew.
Hey everyone, this is Cindy Leinott,
Kira Finkenberg,
Patty Ann Tarleton,
Whitney Bond,
Amy Miller,
Dawn Holiday,
Marcy Allen,
Paula Palazzo,
Becca Leifer, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
And our second segment this week, we're joined by Live Nation Canada's Alex Vyskocil, turning the tables on Steiny.
Me and Alex are hanging out in Canada, and we're going to let him turn the tables on me. So what do you got, man? What's on your mind?
So first question is, when you get an email that says, hey, we spend less on the support budget, we'd like to roll that into the headliner, does Dan Steinberg ever say no?
Of course you do. I guess it's a matter of, are they going to bonus anyway? Because it's a pointless fight. I mean, first thing I do before I respond is I look at the talent. I look if we're going to get there. I look if they're going to bonus and see if it matters. The second thing I do is I look if we're going to lose. Because if it's straight up just coming out of our pocket and they brought less valuable support act, I think that's the moment you fight. If you're going to make money and it doesn't really matter and it's $250 or $500, but you're making money on the show, it's like, all right, whatever. If they're bonusing anyway, sure, whatever. But if you're losing and it's directly coming out of your pocket, yeah, I push back. You're bringing less talent and you want me to pay you more money? That doesn't seem like a deal.
And then outside of, say, Pearl Jam, what was the last show you went to with, say, your wife and just had like a night off where you hung out and just like watched the show?
Foo Fighters. I saw the Foos at Safeco a couple weeks ago. Yeah, my wife and we took my daughter. And, it's funny. The guys from Straight No Chaser have a fun line that says, acapella did this. We're in Hawaii, like on a yacht or something, like after a show, like acapella did this. And I've adapted that to podcasting did this. So I get invited to weird things because of the podcasts that, the Mariners like, do you want to come see the Foo Fighters? Like sit in our private suite. We'll host the food and there's a dessert bar and you can bring your kid. And it's like, podcasting did this. It's just so weird because it's like, yeah, of course I do. But I still love going to shows and I love going to sit in a crowd, be a fan and have that experience. Like hit a bunch of Dead shows this summer. It's just great.
Who is your favorite artist that sat in a car with you that you maybe drove around?
I don't do much of that anymore, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, nobody really does. But if you look back in the past, like, would you be like, oh, like for me, I drove Jizzo around once around Calgary.
Really?
And it was awesome. Like it was a hang and a half to have one of the Wu-Tang members in my car.
On that, I will tell you that I loaned one of my production managers my SUV in my younger days because I drove in a Ford Explorer limited edition that was fairly nice. And he was like, hey, we got to drive the act around. Can I borrow your car? I was like, sure, I'm not going to the show. You can borrow my car. I'll be home that day anyway. So they brought it back and there were 2 roaches in the ashtray and it smelled like I had just promoted Wu-Tang Clan. And it was absolutely Wu-Tang, but it was awesome that he was like, I thought you'd appreciate it. And I'm like, no, I don't fucking appreciate it. I don't know. Face to face was always a fun thing. When I was younger, we used to run bands to radio. That used to be a great way to interact is you'd run to the club and you'd always set up in advance, but you'd run to the club, you'd set it up through the label and you'd go grab, the act. So I'd go get like Trevor from Face to Face and run him over to the radio station and run him through and do the quick interview and, get that drive time hit to sell those extra couple tickets, and then run back, maybe stop at a bar, get a drink or get coffee or whatever, and you get to catch up and you'd have that interaction. And that's when you really became friends with the act, because you were alone with him in the car. I remember Andy Dick and me got into a car accident, me running around to radio stations to do last minute marketing. And it wasn't his fault. Was talking to him, was paying more attention to the fact that Andy Dick was in my car. And this is like news radio days back in the earlies. And it was just like, Andy Dick, this is so cool. It's like, shit. It was totally my fault. Yeah, I got starstruck with Andy Dick. Beat that.
Yeah, I miss that when I was a runner. Like, that was so fun to drive those people around.
Possibly the best time in the industry. That's where I started too, as a runner.
You do a ton of running gigs, and that's where, right out of university, I started doing production, and then I did some running gigs. And then I remember once Juliette Lewis was playing a 500-seat club in Calgary, and they didn't have a runner, trimming everything down. She was back on the road. And then they're like, oh, could you drive her? But I had to drive the whole band. So basically in my little like coupe, I'm like driving like 4 or 5 people, and I hadn't cleaned the back seat of the car. And so she gets in the back seat. Her knees are right up to her chest on like windshield washer fluid container or something. And I remember being so embarrassing. But I was like, hey, you know what? And she played it so cool. Like, she couldn't have been nicer. Like, and I remember being like, oh man, I gotta clean my car. I'm doing shows. So
Alex, thanks for turning the tables with us.
No worries.
Alex is just killing it at the Commodore in Vancouver right now, and we'll have a full interview with him in the weeks to come.
This is Tom Wildridge from Ticketmaster, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Everyone's favorite time, the announcement of the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week.
This week, we are so honored and excited to announce the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week, Nashville's own Marathon Music Hall's Chris Cobb. Well, because he kind of saved my ass this week, but that's a whole nother thing. Plus, he is a great guy doing great things in the business, making him this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week.
Big congrats, Chris.
My name's Tom Windish, and I'm on Promoter 101.
This is the moment everyone on this podcast has been waiting for the last, 10 weeks that we've been teasing this interview. Finally have it here for you. We met up with Tobin Centers Aaron Zimmerman, giving a glimpse of his path to success from Chicago to San Antonio.
Aaron Zimmerman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
So you came back to Wrigley to see Pearl Jam. This is your hometown, but you are the king of San Antonio right now.
San Antonio's been great, but you're right. Hometown of Chicago, there's nothing like it. I grew up a Pearl Jam fan. I grew up a Cub fan, and I've had the opportunity to be at every Wrigley Pearl Jam show ever, and I wasn't going to miss it.
Every Wrigley Pearl Jam show ever?
Well, there's only been 5, so.
That's a pretty good number. I got to say, I think anyone that knows you, I'm not sure that you've fully grown up. It's just you've got a boyish charm that we all seem to love about you.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'd like not to grow up. I mean, I know Toys R Us went out of business, but I'd like to think I'm a Toys R Us kid forever. Yeah. You know, I love this business. I love what we get the opportunity to do. I love music, and I just want to have fun. And if I can have fun every day doing what I'm doing, then I'm in good shape. And, you know, I shouldn't grow old.
Before San Antonio, you had a path through the industry that's really put you some incredibly different places, and including here in Florida. Let's talk about the map.
Let's see. I interned at Cellar Door back in the day in college. That was my free working gig. When I graduated, I moved up to Manhattan, and I worked for a company called Ideal Entertainment, where I handled the day-to-day management for the manager of Gloria Gaynor, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, and the Duke Ellington Orchestra. Spent some time cutting my teeth on the road with them, learning agent lingo, manager lingo, booking travel, and, you know, all the day-to-day logistics, all that kind of stuff, until I got an opportunity to actually come back here to Chicago. And Arnie Granite and Steve Traxler gave me an opportunity at Jam Theatricals. And I spent almost 4 years here in Chicago, working a lot of the Broadway subscription markets across the country, and, you know, even learning more about music. And guys on the music side, you know, Nick, who I think you may have had here recently, or Surzan, you know, they didn't really let us get our hands on the juicy shows because I was still coming on up, but it was a great learning experience for me.
It's basically Jam concerts, but not cool.
If you're a Broadway fan, it is the coolest. How's that?
Okay, I'm not.
We got to do a couple of cool shows in general. I mean, mostly we worked the markets outside of Chicago. We were based in the same office as Jam Productions, but we managed 30 or 32 Broadway subscription markets in secondary and tertiary markets across the country.
Now, there's a fine line between Jam Theatrics and Jam Concerts, and I think part of that is Jerry's not involved with Jam Theatrics, I believe is how that
correct.
works.
Arnie Granite and Steve Traxler started Theatricals as a division of Jam Productions back in the day. At least that's kind of how I understand it.
Or something, but
it was a
Arnie's involved with both.
Arnie is involved in both, and Jerry is not. And I really spent my day-to-day under Steve Traxler and working with a guy named Scott Sampson, who's still there, the vice president of programming for them now. And they're still doing great work over there. I still have a lot of respect for those guys. They do good stuff.
A song from Half Baked, I Want to Talk to Samson, popped in my head.
Scott would appreciate you saying that, actually.
I knew you'd know the reference.
So after a few years at Jam Theatricals, I moved down to Miami, and I got an opportunity to be the director of programming at what was fairly new, a couple years old, the Adrian Arsh Center, downtown Miami, right by the arena there. Spent 2 years as director of programming there before I moved to Tampa. I became the director of programming at the David A. Straz Center in Tampa. Spent a little over 2 years there before I moved back down to really what was Sunrise, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, and I was the executive director of entertainment at the BB&T Center, where the Florida Panthers play. I think you've had a couple people on this podcast, maybe Matt Bell, Sid Greenfeig, both people who had that position prior to myself. After a couple years at the arena, I kind of felt like for me, the theater world was kind of a better fit. I had a little bit more control over the situation in the sense that at the arena, it's mostly AEG or Live Nation arena tours. And while we did the biggest shows, I didn't feel like I was the one necessarily making the offers or completely on the front line.
You were the building.
Yeah, I was. That's absolutely right. And I wanted to be more on the front line. And I got an opportunity to move down to San Antonio a year before they opened the brand new Tobin Center for the Performing Arts, which is a $200 million performing arts facility. And I got to hire the programming and marketing staff, and I've gotten the opportunity to book every show into that building since it's opened.
So let's talk about the Zimmerman, your last name. I believe that makes you part of our Jewish tribe.
I am a tribe, and one of the few that lives in San Antonio these days.
You knew where I was going. Yeah, I didn't imagine that there was a very big, huge synagogue or shul in the world of San Antonio.
You know, you'd be surprised. There actually is a really big shul, and it's beautiful. My parents actually came down for Rosh Hashanah one year and went there. I wouldn't say it's a robust Jewish community, but there is definitely one there.
Well, I think we can all come together, Texans and Jews, and meet in the middle on brisket.
Exactly. Just to be barbecued instead of, broiled or whatever my mom makes on the holiday that tastes so good.
Whatever that magic is.
Yeah, whatever that mama magic is. Right.
You've gone through all of these places, and along the way, you've moved up with a little bit better pay, a little bit better title, a little more responsibility, a little bit more clout. Now you're in what is a brand new facility when you moved down there, and now you're what, in year 3 or 4 or 5? Something like that?
So actually, I moved down there 5 years ago this week. We opened September 4th of 14, and I moved just about a little over a year before we opened. So yeah, 5 years in San Antonio now.
Okay, but it's a state-of-the-art facility.
It is absolutely state-of-the-art. It's actually got the only electronic convertible floor in the country. We can go from 1750 standard raked seating to 2050 standing room only flat floor general admission, and the whole conversion happens in 30 minutes with no labor.
So you basically are the 930 Club of Performing Arts Centers.
You know, it's funny that when I was looking into this opportunity, the pitch to me was that I get to book Carnegie Hall and the House of Blues in the same space because we can go from opera to Nas and Wale on back-to-back nights. And things like that have happened. We'll do hard rock and then hip hop, and then we'll go into the opera and the symphony. But we are a performing arts center, and first and foremost, we do have residents as well. And the symphony, the opera, the ballet all perform in our building along with rock and roll, if you will.
Okay, so I think the thing that would shock many people is San Antonio is an amazingly strong concert market.
Way stronger than I think even I thought. When I looked at the history before I moved there, I realized that there was a lot of acts that were skipping the market, and that led me to believe that there was future opportunity there. Well, when I got to San Antonio, I realized that it wasn't that they were skipping the market on purpose. It was a big enough market that everyone wanted to play, but there was really only one theater in town that had it. Yeah, the Majestic, that had an opportunity or a proper roadhouse for these people to play. So when they have BAA in there and Broadway Across America and Hamilton's playing or Lion King's playing for 6 weeks, well, all of a sudden, every act that is trying to come through at that time just literally doesn't have a place to play. So when the Tobin opened, it gave further opportunity to the city and greater options because it just opened up the calendars between the two buildings. And since then, it's grown just drastically. Live Nation's in the market now with the Aztec Theater, as well as some other buildings that are popping up around the corner.
Okay, so you've got Live Nation booking the market. You've got AEG doing the thing because they're involved with the arena, AEG facilities, which is not necessarily the same thing as AEG concerts, as we all know. But you've got AEG doing shows in the market. You've got Live Nation doing shows in the market. The Majestic does their own shows. You guys do your own shows. C3 obviously pops in, says it's so close. And you've got a handful of independents raking through the market. So you guys are a real market now, and I don't think you necessarily usually get credit for that.
I agree. I don't think San Antonio was considered a real market. It was always the fourth play in Texas. Everyone was willing to go to Houston, Dallas, Austin, but, a lot of times we were being blocked by Austin. Well, the truth is they're different media markets. They might be an hour and 15 door to door, hour and 20, but the people in San Antonio, specifically on a weeknight, if it's not a Saturday, they're not making that drive, and you can play both markets.
Now, is Austin or San Antonio the bigger market in actuality?
San Antonio is actually the bigger market, although it's hard to say that when you're talking about such a music town like Austin, because, artists want to play Austin. It's one of those specific places. You want to play New York or Nashville or Austin, LA. So San Antonio was always second fiddle, but the population is actually, and maybe I shouldn't be quoted on this, but I'm pretty sure it's double, if not more.
So it's a bigger market. You should be able to do more, but some of the things that sell really well in your market that do okay in other markets, like the 80s, you've done really, really well with the Boy George tour. Like, we rolled a second show on that thing.
It's super weird. When I got there, I kind of threw a lot of darts at the wall, and we were trying to figure out what worked and what didn't work. And you would think in a market like San Antonio, it would be a no-brainer country market. Well, it's actually not. And the little things that I learned coming from, Chicago and Miami is that there's a huge difference between Texas country and Nashville country. And we have to be very cautious with things like that. The other things that you wouldn't necessarily know is you would immediately think that it's a huge Latin market, which it is from a perspective of we're 60% Mexican. But Latin is a very weird term for me in the sense that just because you speak Spanish doesn't necessarily make it applicable to all Spanish-speaking people. If you're a Mexican performer, you will do drastically better in San Antonio than you would in Miami. And some of those acts that I would have booked in Miami that are Puerto Rican or Colombian or South American would never play in San Antonio. Now, to that point, the other thing we figured out is that the 80s we never left the 80s. For whatever reason, whatever we do in the 80s, for the most part, we do really well with. We rolled to a second show of Culture Club on the first tour, and we sold it out again this year. We sold out David Byrne in 10 minutes. He's coming back. Billy Idol's on his second sellout. Pat Benatar's sold out 3 times now, I think. So, we do tend to do really well in that era. I don't quite know why, but I know it's always a party at the Tobin when it happens.
Always selling. It's always a party at the Tobin.
Oh, yeah. Yeehaw.
Most venues try to do something cool to open, but you guys really went big. You got Ringo, and having a Beatles amazing, but you wound up getting 2 Beatles.
The opening for us was supposed to be something special. And the idea is that the Tobin Center was built for everybody. And there wasn't a single artist that you could necessarily book that would apply or that everyone would be a fan of. So we were going to do roughly a 1 month that turned into almost 45-day festival, if you will. We didn't have shows necessarily every single night, but I bet you we did somewhere between 25 and 30 shows in 45 days.
Summerfest to open the venue.
Yeah, our little version. And we were all over the board. But the chairman of the board came into my office. Well, the CEO came into my office via the chairman regularly because he really wanted Paul McCartney to open the building.
No problem.
No problem. We're only 1,750 seats, and he's the biggest stadium act on the planet, arguably. And I didn't really know where to go. So after being beat up by the team to say, go get it, we made some calls. Tom Loudermilk, an old friend of mine, and Brad Wavra, who were gracious enough from Live Nation to help us broker the deal with Barry Marshall. And we were able to route through Paul McCartney as one of the opening acts of the Tobin Center. The truth is, I think we almost got lucky because that summer he was doing an Asian tour and he had gotten sick and he had canceled a few of the Asian dates. Well, when he canceled the Asian dates, the tour of Texas actually got pushed. And when it got pushed, the dates fell into our opening month. And so when they rerouted us into the schedule. And to this day, it's absolutely the highlight of my career. Having an opportunity to, book or promote or whatever you want to call it, work with Paul McCartney, especially in such a small room, it was just magical. Full fireworks for Live and Let Die. It was amazing.
It really has to be a cool thing, but you guys continue to try and do this annually. You do a gala.
So every single year we do a Tobin Center benefit concert. The first year obviously was Paul McCartney. The second year we got Lionel Richie 2 years ago, we had Dolly Parton. Last year, we had Steven Tyler. This year, we've yet to announce that, but we try and do this benefit concert every year, which basically puts a legendary act that's really larger than a theater space into the performance space to make it just a unique, special show that can't be missed for the city or music fans in the city. The idea over time is that they'll just get the tickets for the benefit, not knowing who the performer is, because we do such a good job with it every year. Now, that's down the line. This is obviously, future thinking, but that's the theory behind it.
Something huge given back to the community. And there's a charity element with that, of course.
We are a 501c3 operation. We bring 50,000 students to the center every single year for free to see different performers. We want to make sure that children always have an opportunity to see the performing arts, music, and get involved at a young age. I believe that if you're exposed to it as a young age, you're more likely to go and bring your family when you're of that age. And I know my parents brought me as a kid, and that's part of probably why I do what I do today. And so that's part of the best thing about the Tobin is that we really do get to give back, and we have an impact on the community in a positive way as well.
You guys are a nonprofit, but you run your business as if you're a business for profit.
Being nonprofit doesn't mean you can't make money. It also doesn't mean being financially irresponsible.
Right. And this has been a big topic in the arts world because it used to be there was so many grants and there was so much corporate money. It didn't matter how wasteful you were. If you were only selling 30% of ballet for 3 weeks, the idea of cutting down to 1 week would be irresponsible not to bring those arts to the people. But there's another side of the business now that is we can't count on those grants and the corporations to be there. And we learned that with the economy when it fell at 9 years ago, that stuff dries up really quick. And the art foundations that run leaner and meaner and less wasteful were the ones that survived. And the other ones really were screwed.
A lot of the grant money and arts funding, I mean, I think everyone's been seeing what's going on, with the president and the government and the NEA. It's hard. I mean, there's only so much fundraising you can do and only so many people that have money to give on an annual basis to support these products. And the truth is as much as we want to support every type of art and give everyone a place, it does have to, on a certain level, be self-sustaining. If you're presenting an art, but no one actually comes to see it or wants to see it, then what are you doing it for? There is a purpose to keeping the art alive, but there's also the need to be able to present the art that people want to see and are willing to pay for. And there is value when you're presenting a show. And I think the public and or the consumer will tell you if it's something they want to see by buying tickets.
Okay, so there's an interesting part of the business that you and me both happen to be in. A lot of people book rock. A lot of people book the pop mainstream. And then a lot of people book arts. But to be able to do both simultaneously and answer to 2 different communities is a little bit of a twist. And some people have been very good at it. John Valentino in AAG Florida, possibly the best at it.
Couldn't agree more.
But it is kind of a tricky thing to play on both sides of that. How have you found that education process to be able to play on both sides of cool and cultural and hip and answer to the arts at the same time? Because that's a lot to do.
It is. And I think part of my path in my career, arguably starting at Jam Theatricals and learning almost the Broadway side before the rock and roll side, I think helped me figure out the nuances between even on the offers and the difference between a plus and a versus or a flat. And, is there a royalty base? Is there not? Little things like that really help. But there is a drastic difference. But that's almost what I love about it, is that I get to do something different every day. It's not the same stuff all the time. And you do have to be very aware of what's out there and what everyone else is kind of doing and the tours that are going out. But it allows me to make greater relationships with different agents and different agencies, opposed to just calling CA or William Morris or ICM, for example, on a weekly basis.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. And when you're balancing trying to book Yo-Yo Ma and trying to clear a hold for Jason Mraz simultaneously, you're playing in 2 distinct different worlds, but creating a very well-rounded brand for a venue. And I think at the end of the day, that's the goal for the art centers, especially the nonprofits, is bringing a diverse amount of talent into the market.
That's actually right. And that's how we started. And that's how we built our first opening festival, if you will, is that the Tobin is supposed to be a place for everyone. I don't care if you're 2 years old, if you're 100 years old, where you were born, where you're from, what you look like. The idea is that we will have a show throughout the course of an annual year that you can appreciate on some level. You might not like every show. You might not appreciate every show, but there's going to be something that you can appreciate and enjoy.
Aaron, I want to thank you so much for taking time and joining us on your vacation day here in Chicago.
It's been a good time. Thank you for having me, Dan.
Zimmerman is a good guy. Thrilled we finally got him on the show.
This fall, coming to a conference near you. Two legends meet face to face.
Activists Bernie Cahill, Emporium presents Dan Steinberg, Billboard Live.
Bernie Cahill here. I'll be doing the keynote with Dan Steinberg at Billboard Live, Montage, Beverly Hills, November 13th.
Hey, it's time for some birthdays of the week this September 28th to October 4th, 2018. Friday the 28th, got to wish a happy birthday to Kevin Sir, Dan Jones, Mac Presents, Marcy Allen, Abby Wells, the aforementioned Chris Cobb, Badass of the Weekend, a birthday, good day. Dr. Buzz Reefman, Dr. The Stars in Denver, Ken Tomzek, Ace Barajas, Josh Balin, and the Crystal Pistol himself, Mr. Henry Glasscock. A lot of birthdays on Friday the 28th.
Saturday, the 29th, Alan Young, Adam Stanford, the beautiful Lisa Christofferson, Daniel Hoffman, Chris Miller, Quinn Donahue, and Jay Fry.
On Sunday the 30th, got to wish a happy birthday to Troy Lawton, Elaine Steele, Barry Weisblot, Straight No Chasers, Mike Luganbill, and Steve Larian.
Monday, 10/1, we're in October now. Peter Temkins, the king of insurance, Becky Allen, and Sarah Vale.
On Tuesday the 2nd, wishing a happy birthday to Lauren Stark, Phil Kosh, Jay Goldberg, and Scott Warren.
Wednesday. We'll sell you the whole birthday, but you only need the third. Rico O'Connor, Matt Schultz, Shep Goodman, and Scotty Tobias from the beautiful world of Westward.
On Thursday the 4th, got to wish a happy birthday to Keith Nesbitt from APA, WME's Seth Siegel, and Aaron Rosen.
Happy birthday from, well, all of us, particularly me and Luke.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. You look good.
You look good.
Have you lost weight?
How does being a year older feel?
Call your mother.
Tom Chauncey, Partisan Arts. This is Promoter 101.
That's it. That's the end of episode 102 of Promoter 101. Dan, still feeling a little weird in the triple digits, but glad we're here. Thanks for everyone who tuned in today. Thanks to our amazing guests. Some 3 awesome interviews this week.
The quote of the week comes to us from Paul Simon, who had a monster week closing out his farewell tour in New York. Most people don't listen to lyrics first. They listen to the sounds. Feel free to write us at Steiny at promoter101.net. Or don't. It's no big deal. It's not like, we care or anything.
We're back next week, episode 103 of Promoter 101. Same pod time, same pod place. We're going to be joined by Live Nation Canada's president, Paul Hagenson. Also, the Triple Doors, Scott Giampino and Larry Butler coming on the podcast to do a war story. Looking forward to episode 103, Dan.
Well, that'll do it for us. And we're wishing you... not sold out, but pretty comfortable shows for the week to come.
96% sold on the weeks to come.
Yeah, you're in points and it's all their money anyway.
You're deep into points,
Deep into points.
Into points, cheers.
Hi, my name's Toby Leighton Pope. I work for AG Presents in the UK and I'm on Promoter 101.